Hello and welcome to today's edition of Daf Yomi. It's Chullin Part 1, Steinsaltz edition, Daf 72, Amud 8. The Gemara objects, what about the Mishnah's case of a dead fetus in the mother's womb and a midwife who touched it there, which is similar to the case of two swallowed rings, and yet the Mishnah rules that the fetus renders the midwife impure. Well, instead, the fetus is different from a ring in this regard, since it will ultimately leave the womb. Rather than imprisonment, is that to say that a fetus will ultimately leave the womb, but a ring that someone swallowed will not ultimately leave his body? A ring will certainly be expelled eventually as well. Rather, Rava said the scholars of Pumbedita, and there's a footnote here about the city of Pumbedita and the Euphrates River, which can be read if you have the edition or just Google it. Know the reason for this matter, and who is the sage that referred to? And who is the sages referred to as the scholars of Pumbedita? It is Rav Yosef. As Rav Yosef says, that Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, this impurity of the midwife is the Mishnah's case. Sorry about that. Just dropped the phone. I'll go from the top of that paragraph. As Rav Yosef said, that Rav Yehuda says that Shmuel says, this impurity of the midwife in the Mishnah's case is not in effect by Torah, or rather it was decreed by rabbinic law. The Gemara asks, what was Shmuel's intention in emphasizing it is not in effect by Torah, or rather it was decreed by rabbinic law? It should have sufficed for him to say that the impurity is decreed by rabbinic law. The Gemara answers, he said this so that you should not say that the ruling of the Mishnah is only according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva, who says that one who touches the dead fetus in a woman's womb is impure by Torah law. Ubad b'mei isha tamei. A dead fetus in a woman's womb is impure despite the fact that it has not yet left the womb, in according to the opinion of Rabbi Akiva. And that's from the Rambam Sefer Tahara, Hechatumas Meis 25:8. By Torah law, and that is why the midwife was rendered impure. Rather, even according to the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, who says that one who touches a dead fetus in a woman's womb is pure by Torah law, nevertheless, the sages decree that a midwife who touches it is impure by rabbinic law. The Gemara asks, what is the reason for this decree? Rav Oshaya said, it's a rabbinic decree that the fetus extend its head out of the concealed opening of its mother's womb. If it did, it would be regarded as having been born, and it would then be richly impure by Torah law. The sages were concerned that the fetus extended its head, and then the head turned inside, but the midwife did not notice. Consequently, when she touched the fetus, she mistakenly assumed that she remained richly pure. To safeguard against this, the sages decreed that in any case where she touches the dead fetus, she is richly impure. The one objects. If so, the sages should also decree that the woman herself who is carrying the fetus is impure, since she also might not notice that the fetus had emerged. The Gemara explains that a woman actually senses with regard to her own body whether the head of the fetus had emerged. The Gemara asks, but then she should have said this to the midwife, why is there a need for a decree? The Gemara answers, since the mother is distracted by the pain of childbirth, she now depends of mind to warn the midwife. The Gemara cited a dispute as to whether one who touches a dead fetus and woman is really impure. It now elucidates that dispute. What is the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel? And what is the opinion of Rabbi Akiva? As is taught in the Bible with regard to the verse, and whoever in the open field touches one who is slain by the sword, or one who dies on his own, or a bone of a man, or a grave, shall be impure 7 days. Numbers 19:16. The phrase in the open field indicates that one is rendered impure only in a case where he touches an exposed corpse. This serves to exclude one who touches a dead fetus in a woman's womb from being rendered impure. This is a statement of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva says this phrase serves to include the grave cover, the golel. The golel was a large stone that was rolled onto a grave or burial cave to see its entrance. Important burial caves are covered with large, well-shaped stones that could be rolled back to allow entrance to the cave. And there's a picture of it here. Yes, it's a large stone, right? And the grave walls upon which the cover rests as sources of impurity that render impure anyone who touches them. The Gemara asks, And from where does Rabbi Shmuel derive that the grave covers and the grave walls? Rashi explains that when the Gemara refers to a grave, the reference is specifically to an interred coffin. Accordingly, these words refer to the size and cover that make up the coffin. The Rambam explains that the walls are called the fekim, because they press the hakim upon the dead, and the cover is called golel, as it often consisted of stone that be rolled megalgel on top of the grave, and that's from the Rambam's commentary on the Mishnah Ocholot 2:4. Both commentaries assume these items are part of the grave of a corpse buried in the ground. Other commentaries question this interpretation, as the Gemara here discusses a body found in an open field, not buried in the ground. They therefore explain that the grave cover is the gravestone placed over the grave, whereas the wall refers to the stones upon which a headstone rests. And that's from Tosfot on Ketubot 4b, citing the Rabbeinu Tam. The other footnote: if one places vessels, stones, or anything on the side of a corpse and covers the corpse on top with a similar item, both the size and cover impart impurity imparted by contact, as well as impurity imparted in a tent, but they do not impart impurity by being carried. The impurity imparted by the item due to a rabbinic decree, and the verse stated by Rabbi Akiva is made support for this halacha, but not the actual source. Rambam says that the Torah Hilchot to his mate 2:15, that says the Mishnah there, and see the Ravid there. When one touches them impure, he learned this halacha through tradition, not from a verse. The Gemara asked, and as for Rabbi Akiva, from where does he derive that a dead fetus in a woman's womb is impure by Torah law? Rabbi Shaya said he derives it from the verse that states, whoever touched a corpse of the life of a person that died, he will be impure. Numbers 19:13. The term of the life can also be interpreted as inside the life. What is the case for corpse that's inside the life of a person? You must say that this is a dead fetus inside a woman's womb. The Gemara comments, and Rabbi Shmuel requires that verse to teach about a quarter log of blood that comes from a corpse, meaning that even if it imparts impurity like a corpse, as it is stated, whoever touches a corpse of the life of a person that died, Numbers 19:13. What is the case of a life of a person that imparts impurity? You must say this is referring to a quarter log of blood. Rashi explains that the quarter log of blood is a minimum quantity of blood needed by an individual to remain alive. Therefore, even a quarter log of blood imparts impurity of a corpse. An alternative explanation appears in the Tosefta in Ocholot 3:2, where Abba Shaul states that every fetus contains a quarter log of blood at the beginning of its formation. And that's from Rabbi Shimshon of Sands on Ocholot 2:2. As blood is regarded as the life of a person, as the verse states, for the blood is a life in Deuteronomy 12:23, and a person requires a minimum of a quarter log of blood to survive. The Gemara comments, and Rabbi Akiva does not accept this derivation. He conforms to his line of reasoning, as he says even a quarter log of blood that comes from two corpses, a quarter log of blood that comes from combining the blood from two corpses is pure, and the quarter log must come from a single corpse for its implied impurity. The halacha is not in accordance with the ruling of Rabbi Akiva, whose opinion is disputed by the rabbis in the Mishnah Ocholot 2:6. Rambam says that the Torah Hilchot to his mate for one. Parts which impurity and attend to people and other items that are under the same roof. As it taught in the Brisa, from where is it derived that a quarter log of blood it is derived from the verse, as it states with regard to the prohibition against priest and contact with the dead body, he shall not come upon any people that are a corpse. Now shut mace. Leviticus 21:11. The use of the plural term people, nashot, indicates that the blood imparts impurity even if it comes from two people, as blood is referred to as nefesh, Deuteronomy 12:23, and the use of the singular term corpse mate indicates that this blood combines to complete one measure, where the minimum amount of a quarter log required to impart impurity. If an animal is accounted difficulty giving birth, Behema Amkasha. If an animal has difficulty giving birth, and the fetus extends its foreleg, and the owner severs it, and then slaughters the mother, the limb that was cut is considered an animal carcass. while the rest of the fetus is ritually pure. If one slaughtered the mother and then severed the limb, the foreleg is regarded as a terefa that was slaughtered, and the flesh of both the mother and the fetus are ritually impure due to having been in contact with a terefa. They therefore impart rich impurity to sacrificial food, but not to teruma. The halacha and the quantity opinion of the rabbis and the Rambam Sefer Tahara Hilchot Sharat Avatumot 2:9. As a result, the fetus extended its foreleg outside the mother's womb, and someone severed it, and afterwards slaughtered the mother animal. The flesh of the fetus is ritually pure. The foreleg itself is ritually impure. Since the slaughter of the mother is not effective with regard to foreleg, therefore even before the mother slaughter, the limb is considered either from the limb of a living animal or an animal carcass with the associated impurity. Nevertheless, the remainder of the fetus inside the mother is not rendered impure through its contact with that limb. This is because the animal cannot become impure while alive. The commentators add that even if the fetus was dead, it would not be rendered impure because the fetus is considered as part of the mother animal. As long as the mother is alive, the fetus as well is regarded as being alive in this regard. Once the mother is slaughtered, both the mother and the fetus are thereby regarded as food, which can be rendered impure through the contact with the limb. If one slaughtered the mother and afterwards severed the foreleg, the flesh of both the mother animal and the fetus are obviously impure due to having been in contact with a carcass. Rashi offers two interpretations of this statement. According to the first interpretation, the foreleg is not considered like an animal carcass, but it is considered like a limb severed from a living animal, which implies a severe form of impurity either through contact or by being carried, just like an animal carcass in C 128b. According to the second interpretation, the foreleg is actually regarded as an animal carcass. In this case, as the case concerns a situation where the fetus was subsequently found dead in its mother's womb. Although the rest of the fetus is permitted through the slaughter of the mother, it is only because it remained inside the mother's body, in which case the slaughter of the mother also renders the fetus is permitted. By contrast, since the foreleg of the dead fetus had left the mother, it is nevertheless permitted and remains prohibited and impure just like any dead animal. The commentaries note that these interpretations are linked to an Amoraic dispute on 74a concerning how to interpret the mission of Rabbi Akiva Eiger. Rabbi Betzalel Ronsberg tells us note that Rabbi Meir must hold, in accordance with the opinion on 73a, that the slaughter of an animal renders such a limb as though it had already fallen off immediately prior to the slaughter. That is why Rabbi Meir holds that the limb is regarded as a limb severed from a living animal, or as a carcass, because it was not considered to be connected at that moment of slaughter. It follows that according to Rabbi Meir, before the slaughter, when the limb is certainly still considered attached, the limb is not impure. Since the foreleg was not permitted to be consumed through the act of slaughtering, it is considered as a carcass with the associated rich impurity. The rest of the flesh, which was permitted to be consumed by the slaughter, was in contact with it, and so was rendered rich impure from it. This is the same as Rabbi Meir. The rabbis say, flesh has the rich impurity of having been in contact with the terefa that was slaughtered. According to the rabbi, the extended foreleg is not considered to be detached from the rest of the fetus, and so it does not have the stages of a limb from a living animal. Nevertheless, it is prohibited for consumption, as it is the flesh that left its boundary, and according to the derivation of the verse on 68a, and flesh in the field, a terefa you shall not eat. Exodus 23:30. Even though the slaughter of his mother does not serve to negate that prohibition, it is effective in rendering it pure from the impurity of an animal carcass, in the same way that the slaughter of a terefa renders it pure from the impurity of a carcass, despite the fact that it is prohibited to consume it. Therefore, the foreleg is actually pure by Torah law, and the impurity referred here by rabbinic law. The rabbis explain the rationale behind their opinion. Just as we found in the case of a terefa, that its slaughter renders it richly pure, if a terefa is richly slaughtered in a proper manner, it is richly pure, even though it's prohibited for consumption. Our 2.26 according to Torah, i.e. ritual slaughter does prevents it from having ritual impurity of a carcass, despite not rendering the animal permitted for consumption. So too the slaughter of a mother animal should render the limb of its fetus that left the womb pure, despite the fact that the consumption is prohibited. Rabbi Meir said to them, no, if the slaughter of a terefa renders the body of an animal ritually pure, it is because the slaughter is performed on something that is part of his body, i.e. its throat. Does it necessarily follow that you should also render the limb that left the womb pure, given that it is something that is not part of the mother's body? Certainly not. The Mishnah asks, from where is it derived with regard to a terefa that the slaughter renders it ritually pure? I prevents it from having the ritual impurity of a carcass. The Mishnah notes that it is a reason to say that the slaughter should not render it pure, as one cannot compare a terefa with a non-kosher animal. A non-kosher animal is for consumption, so a terefa is prohibited for consumption. Therefore, just with regard to a non-kosher animal, its slaughter does not render it ritually pure, so too with regard to a terefa, slaughter should not render it ritually pure. If a terefa was ritually slaughtered in the proper manner, it is ritually pure, even if prohibited for consumption. That's the Rambam say of the Ha'echasha of 2.26. The Mishnah questions the comparison. Now, if you said that slaughtering cannot prevent an animal from having the ritual impurity of a carcass, in the case of a non-kosher animal, which is distinct in that it did not have a period of potential fitness when slaughtering, it could have rendered consumption permitted, it does not necessarily follow that you should also say that in this case of a terefa, which did not have a period of potential fitness. Perhaps, since the animal has had a period of potential fitness, its slaughter remains effective in preventing it from having the ritual impurity of carcass. The Mishnah rejects this distinction. Take back to yourself this clearly put, that it is insufficient. What about the case where an animal was born in a terefa from a womb, and so it never had a period of potential fitness? For such a case, where did the slaughter rendered it ritually impure? The Mishnah reformulates the distinction. Now, if you say that slaughtering cannot prevent a prohibited animal from having the ritual impurity of a carcass with regard to a non-kosher animal, which is distinct in that there are no animals of its kind that are permitted to slaughtering, as the Torah states, the concept of slaughtering only with regard to kosher animals, doesn't necessarily follow that you should also say with regard to a terefa kosher animal, given that there are other animals of its kind that are permitted through slaughtering, i.e. kosher animals that are not terefa. Perhaps since the concept of slaughtering is relevant to that kind of animal, it can serve to prevent the animal from having ritual impurity of a carcass, even if the slaughter cannot render it permitted for consumption. The Mishnah knows. Based on this reasoning, one must conclude that with regard to an 8-month-old fetus that was born alive, the slaughter of an 8-month-old animal that was born alive does not render it impure from the impurity of a carcass. This is because there are no animals of that kind that are permitted to slaughtering. Some authorities rule that the halacha is according to the opinion of the Tannaim and Shabbat 136a, who rule that its slaughter does not render it pure from this impurity. Rambam says the Ha'echasha of 2.26. See the case of the Mishnah there. So it does not render ritually pure, and there are no animals of this kind that are permitted to slaughtering. The Torah applies the concept of slaughter only with regard to animals that were born full term. The Mishnah states that according to Rabbi Meir, if a foreleg of a fetus emerges from a womb and is severed after the slaughter of the mother, it is regarded as a carcass and with the associated ritual impurity. Furthermore, the rest of the fetus from which it was cut is thereby rendered ritually impure through its contact with the foreleg. The Gemara asks, why should the rest of the fetus be impure? This is a case of impurity imparted within a concealed area. So what does that mean? Tumas Beis Hasorim. One who touches an impure item located in a place that cannot be seen is not rendered impure. The reason is that impurity within a concealed area cannot be imparted elsewhere. As the Rambam says, Tahara Chotumas Mace, 1-3. As the point of contact between the foreleg and the feet existed when they were still naturally connected to each other. And the halacha is that an impure item within a concealed area is not implied impurity if the two items were in contact within a concealed area and not on an external surface. Impurity cannot be imparted from one item to the other. Shall we say that Rabbi Meir conforms to his standard line of reasoning in this regard, as he holds that an impure item within a concealed area does impart impurity? This is as we learned in the Mishnah in K 27:10 concerning ritual impurity imparted by treading. If a person who is ritually impure due to having experienced a bodily emission, such as a man who experienced a gonorrhea discharge of zav, sits or leans upon an item that was designated for that purpose, the item is rendered ritually impure due to ritual impurity imparted by treading. The item will then impart impurity to people or utensils that come into contact with it. In the case of a garment that is impure with ritual impurity imparted by treading, or 3 by 3 handbreadths in size, either minimum amount to impart such impurity that was split. What does it mean that was split? When a zav lies, sits, or rides on items designated for such purposes, he renders them primary sources of rich impurity. Anyone who comes in contact with them or moves them is thereby rendered impure with first-degree rich impurity. In addition to a zava, a menstruating woman, a woman after childbirth, and to a certain degree a leper, all impart impurity in this manner. This impurity is referred to by the term treading. The minimum measures for susceptibility to impurity of different items and materials are determined by their quality. Generally speaking, the more significant the item, the smaller will be the minimum size, determining when it becomes susceptible to impurity. A coarser or more irregular garment will have a larger measure. The minimum measure at which an item becomes impure is also determined by the type of impurity in question. A cloth of 3 by 3 handbreadth becomes richly impure with the impurity imparted by a corpse, as a cloth of this size can be used by the poor. See Rashi Shabbat 26b. Conversely, the measure for impurity imparted to an item by a zav lying upon it is 3 by 3 handbreadths. If a cloth can be pure by zav, sitting on it, and subsequently divided as pieces and not impure, as is the halacha with regard to any previously impure vessel which is broken into pieces, and will no longer publish impurity to people and utensils that come into contact with. The Mishnah continues, but each piece will still have the rich impurity of having been in contact with an item that imparted rich impurity imparted by treading. Before the garment was split, when it imparted rich impurity imparted by treading, each piece of the garment was in contact with another piece of it. Through that connection, each piece was rendered richly impure with the impurity having been in contact with rich impurity imparted by treading. When the garment was subsequently split, although the pieces were no longer able to impart rich impurity imparted by treading, they retained the ritual impurity they acquired through their contact with the other pieces before the garment was split. This is a statement of Rabbi Meir. In this case, the contact between the pieces occurred within a concealed area, as the connection between the parts of the same item has the status of a connection within a concealed area. Evidently, Rabbi Meir holds that impurity can be imparted within a concealed area, and it is taught in that Mishnah that Rabbi Yossi says, disagreeing with Rabbi Meir, but what sort of impurity imparted by treading did these pieces touch? Rabbi Yossi disregards the contact between the pieces that occurred before the garment was split, as that contact has the status of a connection within a concealed area. Rather, the only way the pieces were still richly impure is if a zav had touched the garment directly, e.g. when he sat on the garment, he also touched it with his skin. In that case, the garment would also be rendered richly impure due to contact with a zav, and the impurity would remain even after the garment was split. It would appear then that the opinion of Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah here can be reconciled only with the opinion of Rabbi Meir in the Mishnah in Kedem, but not the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. The Gemara responds, wasn't stated with regard to that mission in Canaan that Ullah said they taught that Rabbi Yossi disagrees with Rabbi Meir only in the case of a garment of 3 by 3 handbreadths that was split into smaller pieces, as once it is split, there is no piece large enough to impart to all of the pieces impurity imparted to treading. With regard to pieces of 3 by 3 finger handbreadths that come, are cut from a large garment, everyone agrees that at the time of the separation from the original garment, before they are fully detached from it, they are rendered impure through their contact with the original garment, despite the fact that the contact occurs within the contact area. In this case of the Mishnah here also, one can say that at the time of separation of the flesh and the feet from the limb, it is rendered impure through its contact with the limb. According to Ullah, then the Mishnah can be reconciled also in the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. Rabbeinu said that there is a different explanation of how the Mishnah can be reconciled with the opinion of Rabbi Yossi. A garment does not stand, i.e. it is not intended to be cut. On the contrary, it is better for it to remain whole. Therefore, the connection between the pieces are regarded as being within a concealed area cannot impart impurity. By contrast, with regard to a fetus that extends its foreleg, it does stand to be cut as a prohibited for consumption while the rest of the fetus is permitted, like a principle that any eye does not stand to be cut, regarded as though it was cut. I hope this made sense, and I hope you benefited, and wish you all the best. Bye.